Good morning, everyone, and welcome you all to this virtual presentation. My name is Lang Xiong. I'm a coordinator at the Hmong American Friendship Association. And the topic that we are going to talk today is understanding the Hmong culture. It's a guide to AODA treatment professionals. And presenting here with me is Sandra Christensen. And here's Sandra.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a grant writer and an adult educator who's worked with the Hmong community for over 15 years. So part of what I'll be sharing with you today is some of that experience, and I hope you can learn from some of the mistakes that I've made over the years. A couple of housekeeping things I just want to mention before we get started. First of all, although this is billed as a guide for AODA treatment professionals, we know we have many other people in the audience as well who are involved in other areas of behavioral health. And I think that you will find also that much of this information will be very helpful to you. We will be sending you a copy of the slides as well as an evaluation form after the session today, and would ask that you please return that evaluation form to us. It's important for us to get that feedback from you, and we will give you information about how to get those evaluations back to us. Although we're scheduled until noon today, we're not sure exactly how long this will run because we've scheduled in time to answer your questions, and we want to make sure that we have time to do that at the end of the presentation. So we've allowed some time for that and would ask that you please put your questions into the Q&A section of the Zoom platform, so that we can address those for you. We'll also take a break roughly halfway through the presentation this morning, so you do have a chance to get up and stretch your legs. Lang and I also have put our email addresses into the chat. So if you do have any specific questions you want to address to either of us, you can do that, and we will get back to you after the training today. Before we jump in with the content, I do want to just share with you what our learning objectives are for this morning, the things that we hope you will take away from this session. First of all, we hope that you will gain an understanding of Hmong history and culture, including the traditional role of opium in Hmong culture. We want to help you appreciate the significant amount of trauma that almost all Hmong families have experienced, because that trauma does have an impact on their mental health and on substance use. We certainly want you to be aware of the many ways that Hmong clients are just like any other client, but at the same time recognize the ways in which traditional Hmong values and beliefs do affect views regarding illness and treatment in the Hmong community. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, we hope that you'll be ready to implement some new approaches to outreach and treatment of Hmong clients, especially those who have opioid use disorders. So Lang, I think you wanted to recognize some of the organizations that have helped us with this presentation.
Yeah, this presentation is made possible with the support and assistance from the Hmong 18 Clan Council of Wisconsin, Hmong American Center of Warsaw, Hmong American Partnership Fox Valley, and Hmong Cultural and Community Agency of La Crosse. I also like to thank our funder, the Department of Health and Services of the state of Wisconsin, and the Frederick Medical College of Wisconsin. And next, Sandra will talk more about what we will cover today.
We've really divided our presentation into three main sections. First, we'll be talking briefly about a history of the Hmong people. So we will talk about before, during, and after the Vietnam War. It's especially important for professionals who are working with Hmong people to understand some of this Hmong history, because there's so much trauma within the lives of most Hmong families that you are going to meet. And that trauma sometimes leads to mental health issues. It in turn can lead to self-medicating with opioids and other drugs. And opium is something that has played a significant role in Hmong history that continues today. Secondly, we'll be taking a look at Hmong traditions. Lang will be explaining some things to you about clan and family structure, and about some of the traditional values and beliefs that are common in the Hmong community. And then finally, we will talk about providing treatment, both outreach, which of course has to precede providing any kind of treatment. There has to be a way to reach out to people and bring them into your facility or your office. And then how can you go about integrating some traditional healing practices into the way that you provide treatment to your Hmong clients? So we'll start with the brief history of the Hmong people, and I'm going to turn things back over to Lan.
All right, the first major section that I'd like to share with you is a brief history of the Hmong people. And the Hmong history can trace back about 4,600 years in the central China along Yangtze River. Hmong were a subgroup of the Miao people living in the mountain of southern China. Eventually, cruel repression by Chinese leaders, including massacres of Hmong people and destruction of their villages, led many Hmong to migrate south to Laos and Vietnam. This migration began in the mid-18th centuries and continued into the early 20th centuries. Hmong people primarily settled in the highlands of Laos and Vietnam, where the native people did not live. They grew crops such as rice and corn and raised cattle, goats, and pigs. They also cultivated opium. The cooler climate of the highlands was just right to grow opium. And opium was used as a medicine, not only for pain, but for stress relief and digestive issues. It is estimated that 8 to 12% of the Hmong opium farmers were addicted to opium. And that's according to Westmeyer in 1981. The Hmong were taxed unfairly in Laos, and some rebelled. In Vietnam, some of the Hmong rebelled against the French colonialism, and during the World War II, some Hmong were involved in fighting between the French and Japanese. But most of the fighting happened in the low-lying area, which was not where the Hmong people live. And for this particular slide, I'd like to share with you a little bit that during this time, the French missionary create the writing for the Hmong people, which had not existed before. Just about 1953, that some Hmong people were start to learn how to read and to write their own language. And by this, I'd like to share too that the Hmong language is a tonal language, meaning that we have 8 different tones. And to learn Hmong, you just need to get your ear accustomed to the different pitches, the up and down. And if anyone would like to practice speaking Hmong, you're certainly welcome to contact the Hmong American Friendship Association.
So Lan, when you were growing up, did you learn to write Hmong according to this system that was developed by this French missionary?
Yes, I did. Because I did learn some ABC characters back then too, because we used to be under the French system, so we learned some ABC character already too. So that helps a lot to learn the Hmong, and I did learn the Hmong, the writing and all of that.
So was some of your education in French?
Yes, I was fluent in French. Mm-hmm. And during this particular slide, I'd like to share with you is that during the Vietnam War, the Hmong in Laos were recruited by the CIA to help fight the spread of communism. Young Hmong men were trained and armed by the CIA and were involved in 3 different missions here. Number 1 is the rescuing the downed US pilots. Number 2, gathering intelligence. And number 3 is cutting off the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which cut through Laos. This is sometimes referred to as the secret war in Laos, because the US government did not acknowledge that the US had expanded the war into Laos. It was a secret war in Laos, however, where the US dropped more than 2 million tons of ordnance on Laos during 580,000 bombing sessions from 1964 to 1973. An estimate varies, but it is likely that 30 to 40,000 Hmong soldiers and civilians died in the conflict of the Southeast Asia. When the US pulled out of Southeast Asia in 1975, communists gained complete control over Laos. The Hmong were now target of retaliation and fled to Thailand. escaped to Thailand men crossing the Mekong River, usually at night to avoid detection by communist soldiers. Parents used opium to quiet their children, and many died during the exodus. And with this, I'd like to share with you some of my experience. My personal experience was that about at that time, to flee to Thailand, about 100 of my villagers that fled together through area where communist soldiers were nearby. And my uncle has a 2-year-old daughter, my 2-year-old niece, cry a lot. So my uncle had to use opium to quiet her down so we could safely escape the area. She almost died, but she grew up with mental problem, now living in California. And it is estimated that 50,000 died after the war trying to flee to Thailand. This is more than the number killed in the war.
That's amazing. And the fact that we in the US didn't even acknowledge that this had happened for many, many years until after.
Yeah, it's a lot of the challenge to really, the Hmong were into a lot of challenge, a lot of hard time fleeing from Laos to Thailand, definitely.
So the Hmong people have really never had their own country. They were in China, then they were in Laos, some were in North Vietnam, then they went to Thailand. But none of these was really just their own country.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The Hmong had no particular country, said the Hmong country, but we are part of as an ethnic in Laos or ethnic in China or in other countries, which is, Laos Hmong was one of the major ethnic group in Laos. Yes. Mm-hmm. With this slide, it shows the picture of the refugee camp in Thailand. So once in Thailand, the Hmong people obtained refugee status and were housed in refugee camp. From the camp, they were displaced to the West, mostly France and the US, but some to Australia and other countries as well. First Hmong refugees began to arrive in the US from Thai refugee camp in late 1975 and early 1976. Reached a peak of 27,000 in 1980. Refugees continued to come throughout 1980s into the early 1990s. Thailand began closing refugee camp by the early 1990s, though there were still many Hmong refugees in Thailand. A Thai Buddhist monk allowed refugees to stay in a temple north of Bangkok, about Temkabal. These refugees had no official status in Thailand, but the Thai government wanted them to forcibly send back them to Laos, but many were afraid to do so. And Sandra, you can elaborate a little more about the numbers, yes.
Yeah, in late 2003, the US government agreed to accept 15,000 refugees who were living in this refugee camp in Thailand. They started to arrive in June of 2004. And I remember that because that was the time when I was just beginning to work with the Hmong American Friendship Association. There were over 3,000 refugees who arrived in Wisconsin between 2004 and 2006. And I think that's important to recognize because some people have this idea that all of the Hmong refugees came right after the Vietnam War and don't realize that they continued to come for many more years after that. This is perhaps a good time as well to talk about the difference between a refugee and an immigrant. We often use those terms interchangeably, but they really mean two different things. Immigrants are someone who choose to resettle in another country. Often they come for economic reasons. A refugee is someone who's been forced to flee his or her own country. And definitely the Hmong people who came here came as refugees. They were really victims of genocide in Laos. And could not stay in Thailand forever because the Thai government was not open to that. And we certainly owe the Hmong people a debt of gratitude for their assistance to us during the Vietnam War. And that is what led to refugees being admitted to the US.
Yeah, definitely. All the Hmong, if you talk to any Hmong at all, we do appreciate the fact that the American people, that the American government didn't help the Hmong coming out of the communist countries such as Laos into refugee camp in Thailand and come into the U.S., where the Hmong are really, really appreciated, really appreciative of the fact that the government really do have the Hmong people here. So.
We're going to take a look now at something that's called a story cloth. Some of you may have seen one of these before. This is a cloth that tells the history of the Hmong people. And we're going to take a break in just a couple of minutes so that you can take a few minutes to really study this story cloth, and we will kind of zoom in on different areas of it so you can see them in a little bigger format. But what I'd like you to look at as you look at the story cloth is what do you see in the history of the Hmong people that seems to be an indication of some of the trauma? So think about what Long was just talking about in terms of the history going all the way back to China, and see what you can pick out of the story cloth. And then we're going to invite you to put your comments into the chat section on the Zoom platform and tell us, what do you notice that looks like trauma? So we'll give you a little bit of time to do that. And let's see, we'll say until about 10:22. So take a chance to do that, get up and stretch if you need to do that. And then when we come back, we'll take a look at this together and point out some things to you about the story cloth.
Sure. Just going back to, I think, an earlier slide, a little bit to as history, that the Hmong history date back in 4,600 years ago, back in China. But then actually the Hmong had no country. It's a part of it. The Hmong were just an ethnic group in China, but then coming into as fleet to Laos, the northern part of Laos, or Vietnam, or Thailand, Laos, and all of that. There would be just the Hmong were just a ethnic group in there. But here, if you take a look at the story cloth at the upper left corner, that's represent China, and then from there, just keep running, keep moving. The story here, the story cloth represent a little over than 100 years of the Hmong history. So coming from the southern part of China, moving to the northern part of Laos, as you can see an airplane there, because at that time the CIA came to recruit the Hmong to be part of that secret war. American planes, that's an American plane in the military base Longcheng. And then from there, a lot of fighting from 1960 also all the way to 75. That's a lot of fighting. And then the Hmong start right after 1975, where the communists took over Laos. Then the Hmong start to keep fleeing from their own village to the middle part of Vientiane, and cross to different part like that, and cross the Mekong River. And as you can see, crossing the river, it's a challenging part of the whole exodus here, because imagine that mom and dad, or they used to be just farmers. They don't know how to swim at all, but trying to carry a baby or two and some supply, also some food supply, and trying to get across that Mekong River, either on a tube, or just hang on to anything that float. So a lot of Hmong get shot by communist soldiers in the river itself, or just get flipped over and they die. And that's why the number is that 50,000 Hmong die after the war. And through the whole exodus there, then as you can see, it's going, just keep moving, moving place to place, and then crossing that river into refugee camp as the middle, the lower part of the Padao. We call Padao is the story cloth, and you can see those bigger, longer building there are a refugee camp. As they are housed in refugee camp there, they got interviewed, they got accepted to going to the west, and then going in big bus, and then going to Bangkok. You can see a big airplane at the very left lower corner. It's a big airplane, could be a 747 coming down to America and so forth. So that's how the whole history here, and it's a lot of moving, a lot of bombing, definitely, because 15 years of fighting, a lot of over 2 million tons of bomb ordnance get dropped in Laos, and 580,000 bombing mission in Laos and so forth. So that's why it's a lot of bombing, a lot of movement here.
Well, let's look at where the Hmong people who ended up on that big airplane flying to the United States ended up. We know that Wisconsin is the state with the third largest number of Hmong people, following California and Minnesota. And this is a chart showing you the top 10 metro areas where Hmong people live as of 2019. It'll be interesting to see when the 2020 census data comes out if there are some shifts in this. But you can see that Milwaukee, Wisconsin ranks 4th on the list. And if you go down to the bottom, Wausau and Sheboygan also are part of that top 10. So 3 of those top metro areas are within Wisconsin. All right, we're going to move on now to move on from history to talk about some Hmong traditions and beliefs. And before Lang does that, there are a couple things I do want to talk about in terms of just recognizing that, of course, first and foremost, your Hmong clients are human beings, and they are in many ways like any client that you may work with. They have the same basic needs, both physical and emotional. They often experience mental illness or substance abuse as a result of trauma. And clearly, we've seen that there's a great deal of trauma in Hmong history, and even for younger Hmong people, there may be that epigenetic transfer of trauma from generation to generation. People who are Hmong tend to be a little bit more open to treatment if they're younger and they're more Americanized. And I think we would find that to be true in general in the population, that younger people tend to be a bit more open to treatment, and you would certainly find that as well in the Hmong community. And like all people, they want to feel better. They don't want to be suffering with mental health issues or with substance abuse. So I think it's important to just have that backdrop as we start to look at some specific things about understanding the way Hmong culture is organized and some of their beliefs traditionally about illness and treatment. So I'm going to turn this back over to Lang to talk about clan and family structure. First of all, explain to us how Hmong families and clans are set up, Lang.
Yeah, the Hmong clan and family structure, it is a patriarchal structure, meaning that the men usually run more of the show, because back then there's a lot of farming, from a farming background, working out a very hard job out in the farm. So the man is usually being out there doing the very hard job over there too. But definitely the ladies are really helping a lot with the kids, with a lot of hard work behind that too. So, but it is a patriarchal structure. And the Hmong has only 18 last names. So those constitute the 18 clans. And the wife become part of the husband's clan.
So we know what clan someone is in based on their last name.
Last name, yeah. And so we have only 18 last names within the whole Hmong community. It's only 18 last names. So some, let's say in Milwaukee, we may not have all the 18 here, but they're more concentrated in a certain area and so forth. But the whole Hmong population, we have only 18 last names. So those are the 18 clans. And the hierarchy of the clans would be the clan leaders and then the clan elders. And in the family too, we have a hierarchy in the immediate family would be the father and an older brother, a younger brother, and so forth.
So how does someone become a clan leader? Is that an inherited position, or how does that work?
No, it is not. And the Hmong do believe that, yeah, the elders who were born first, they had more experience. They learn more. We always have a saying that you eat the more bowl of rice, then you are more wise. We just keep, believe in that. We just keep telling our children, yeah, then respect elders like that. And the next slide would be, I would like to talk about the Hmong tradition in the Hmong values. So we show this deep respect to elders, and we feel one's proper role in society. We try to make sure that the welfare and the reputation of the family and the clan and so forth. And we tell the children to work hard, just like anybody else. Also, avoid conflict with one another, with others. No Hmong custom and appropriate behavior. And with this, I can attest to this with my own example that the Hmong, including myself, I always teach my children to pay respect to elders. Always respect grandpa, grandma, or any elders out there. And to my three boys, I always remind them that they are the one to carry my family and my clan reputation. So they better not do anything bad. We believe that the constant reminding of their role in society and telling them to work hard, that will pay off. So an example also is that imagine that you putting a 16-year-old new refugee kid with the little formal education into a 10th grade class. Beside mom and dad had no education to help with school work, but just keep telling them to work hard. Kid, just keep working hard. We don't know how to help you, but just keep working hard. And I witnessed success story after stories about this. They just keep telling the kids to work hard without knowing what to help, because without any formal education at all. So right. Keep telling them to work hard. That's it. Whatever it takes.
And they recognize that you were going to need that education to succeed in this country.
Yes, we keep telling them that yes, education is the key to success.
And I think these traditional values can be helpful to providers as well in two different ways. One is recognizing that they may make some things more difficult for you, in the sense that Hmong people are traditionally taught to put the needs and the values of the clan or the family above the individual. So that may make it harder to reach out for help because you don't want to reflect in a negative way on your family or your clan. On the other hand, the fact that people are taught to fill their role in society, take care of their family, work hard, those things could be leveraged in a positive way to say, if you're struggling with mental illness, if you're struggling with substance abuse, it's going to be difficult for you to take care of your family and fill that proper role. So I think that these traditional values are something that is important for providers to know about and recognize that it is kind of a double-edged sword. It may make it may make outreach more difficult. It may make it harder for people to say, yes, I'm struggling, I need help. but at the same time, it can increase that motivation to want to do something about their situation.
Yes, certainly, yes.
Let's talk, Lang, a little bit about some of the traditional Hmong beliefs about illness and what some of that might look like.
Sure. Before talking about this slide, I want to point out that Christianity has just been introduced to the Hmong by missionary in the early 1950s. So now about half of the Hmong converted into some sort of a denomination already, but the other half are still carrying on the traditional belief in shamanism, which believe that illness can cause by natural cause or the spiritual imbalance, a curse, or soul loss. So each person has 12 souls. A missing soul can cause illness.
12 souls. All right, you
12
need to explain that to me a little bit.
12 souls, they're depending on, the elders keep telling us that, yeah, each person has 12 souls. So from the mom and dad, as they passed away already, they are there to help guide the children through life. But then each individual has 12 souls, and you just keep believing that those 12 souls are in different way part of us.
Okay, and a missing one can cause illness.
Yeah. So that's why the shaman, it's a trained healer, and who can follow the traditional practice. He can call on the lost soul to be back into the body, and in that sense, then that body that illness can be healed.
So that would be, he would do that through some kind of ceremony?
Some sort of a ceremony, yes.
Okay.
And beside that too, from the history of having no or little Western medicine to help, the Hmong still believe that using opium is an effective medicine in many ailments.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about opium, which comes from the poppy plant. This is a beautiful photograph of a poppy field. It might remind you of a scene from The Wizard of Oz. Before we talk, though, about the use of opium in Hmong culture, I think it's important to recognize that opium was also used to treat many ailments in the United States during what is sometimes referred to as our first opioid epidemic. We hear a lot today about opioid epidemic, but many people are not aware that there actually was an epidemic in the US in the 1840s when both opium and morphine were becoming readily available to people. And over the next 50 years, opium consumption in the US just really soared. Mothers used it to treat themselves and their children. It was used a lot by soldiers to treat not only injuries, but also conditions like diarrhea. Morphine was used a lot during the Civil War. And doctors gave it to treat all kinds of illnesses because at that time, a lot of illnesses were not understood in terms of what caused them in the first place and how to really treat them. So giving someone an injection of morphine was like a magic way to feel better. But as we learned more about the fact that bacteria causes a lot of illnesses, we learned things about like the importance of clean water and the role of public health. A lot of diseases that were being treated with opiates, we found could actually be prevented or could be treated in other ways. This was the late 1800s is also when aspirin became available. So younger, better trained physicians greatly reduced that use of opioids. But in the Hmong community, without the benefit of modern medicine, opium continued to be something that was widely used. And I think we're going to see a little clip now of someone who remembers opioid use back in Laos. Lan, can you introduce this clip for us?
Sure. At this time, I'd like to introduce my dad. He's Sauki Shang, and he's a respected elders and community leaders. So he would talk a little bit more about his own experience on how opium was used. And the fact that there's no hospital around or things like that. So here is the video.
被蒙住给实验人一次头，被出事我内陆冇来，就别个我也一路到南到上楼头路正头嘛呀，路刚都说这实验人很的，我都知道么就在自责个至少我人，我这抓在就说这我人，个我人，这路我人我错着好多年哈。nhà lên đó từ lúc chỉ tao chỉ giá biết cho mong biết cho ô yên rồi biết ô lục khứ nhà giá cho lục mà băng cho lục chế cho này có món nào món hò món nào món nắng yên yên ở ít chỗ cứ dùng chua tá đó mà chỉ mua hồ mò chỉ mua chua khu mò yên nó ở ít chỗ đến cứ nếu mua khó lồng ô tô có nhiều chỉ nào mò khó mò ha nhà lên đó để mò băng cho họ là ta sử dụng nó ô tô我找到路了，然后他实验了我做，因为实了也实了喏，这叫个就用的，需要做的我做的他妈用了的，不治好了，我都个只是用了的，不好他他妈用的，我都闭目眼了，因为追求了这好，追求了这好，对，他要到跳了这好来了，这叫人佛多的我这个你要知道不是找入。不认账就那个我保的了的，从认账了，在国营嘛，国营么不干的，我们认账了，那当的不如好的要当一个的说认账让的，这里我这我努我发个发就我就努了，国营嘛也用人家，那个国营了那的，头个怎么营了那的，刚好当了的，怎么营这个火焰就得找你那个怎么没得伢了，个真就考试了，个怎么父母有人有好事，对，要人家比较好人才比找你，才比帮助自己找你，自己不怎么念他，怎么那么好，这火焰呢呀，你用人家。
Oh, that was really interesting, Lang, to hear that right from your dad and hear his experience. One of the reasons that opium has been used for so many thousands of years actually is that the opium, the process of collecting opium from poppy plants is a relatively simple and straightforward process. And it's a time-consuming and kind of tedious process, but it's something that anybody can do. So the opium is actually the milky substance that comes out of poppy seeds before they ripen. When you can collect that substance by just slicing the pod with a blade, as you can see in this slide, and then collecting the opium gum or resin. From there, you let it dry so that it reaches its final consumable consistency. And after that resin is dry, producers can pack it and store it for future use or for future sale. So as was explained in the little video, opium was in essence almost like something that was in the medicine cabinet, right, of most Hmong families. When the Hmong people first began to arrive in the US after fleeing Laos at the end of the Vietnam War, it's estimated, again by Westermeyer, that about 2 to 5% of those who arrived were addicted to opium.
Yeah, this time I'd like to thank you.
We're going to see another clip now, I believe, right? So this is a clip of someone who actually found himself having some concerns about his own use of opium.
Lúc này, xong ít tháng chụp của chỉ chụp trong đó bên nhau rồi sang tới chờ phụ xe ở Vientiane Trần mà cũng tông tàu cầu chùa để bông lù để còn đó cũng mua lại cọc bê xong chứ để bông lù muốn chờ để giảng học bao để lại lùm lại cũng sang để chủ thể là gì sang lòng đó có sản tờ để đó cái khơi lại để thằng đấy hắn giống như trên sự để chỉ một chùa khu này chỉ một chế khu mò chỉ một than mỏ để cho lòng muốn đồng cua để mua bán rồi xí chuồn mông cho lục khử sư để khó cứ cú tí tòng mò để rồi yên sư để cho lòng mua yên hậu mà cú hậu ít nông tuyệt bây giờ là bây giờ từ mấy hậu bê tỏ một sao lại thế tàu đó có mong hành chỉ của hậu thầu sơn du ha thầu nó tán su ha thầu tổng đủ mà inu hậu bê giờ yên mà cũng sao lại nhau tàu mò từ từ lại thế chỉ tàu lại tới sự thầu yêu hậu yên rồi thì cùng tàu lại chỉ của hậu yên tàu lại alu lì trên ra nó không mò rong rồi tới sự giờ tiền luôn mò yên rồi thì có lẽ là chỉ tàu chỉ cho là một cái tàng để cũng phải sáng ta bây giờ cũng là có cổ bé xong nên nó nhiều tu sư ấy cũng có yên nó giờ rong để chàng của lúc này thì cũng sẽ là giá trị xa tại giờ chủ tàu thủ chủ sao học lần đầu là thì cũng giá giàu ru thì nó thọc cơ thì tôi cần tàu yên rồi của họ đợi này tại ra nó căng nó là căng cờ nữa là chỉ của họ căng đợi là sự khởi đợi tàng sẽ chỉ ít tầm một lô sẽ chỉ phổ yên tôi chỉ mò chỉ buồn đấy là cứ trừ đây đó là từ đầu yên được của họ lô ta và tăng của tôi như hà căng cờ là thì cũng giá trị xa chỉ họ là chỉ là ít mà căng đầu lô tàu alo lì tàng cầu sư thì cũng chỉ phổ yên chỉ mong đi lại để số chỉ mong đợi lô tôi nó thì cũng chỉ đồng bộ tôi căng của lô là để cái hậu yên mà dùng gì thủ yên chỉ dùng gì là.
At this point, I'd like to thank you, Lawyer Ocho, cử sĩ Phương Dòng Sinh Yang, for sharing your personal experience to all of us.
That was quite a testimony. I think it's important to recognize that willpower alone is not always sufficient for ending the use of an opioid like opium, but clearly he was able to do it, which is wonderful. We're going to move into the third part of our presentation this morning and begin to talk about providing treatment. I do want to remind you that we will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. So if there's something that you're wondering about that you haven't heard us talk about yet, this would be a great time to put that in the Q&A so we can be sure to address that. As we talk about providing treatment, the first challenge, as I mentioned earlier, is really outreach, is how do we find people, how do we reach out to people in the Hmong community who might be in need of our services. It's actually rather hard to know how big of a problem opioid use disorder is in the Hmong community. This is an issue we encounter a lot in that very often data is not kept specific to Hmong people. The National Vital Statistics System, for instance, reports on opioid overdose deaths by state, but they only have 3 categories, and the Hmong don't fit into any of them. Sometimes we'll see categories broken down by Asian, but even that can be misleading because there are so many different Asian groups in the United States. Anecdotally, we do know that there are issues with opioid use disorder within the Hmong community, but that it can be difficult to reach out to people. And Lung's going to talk a little bit about why that is.
Yeah, and the stigma about both mental illness and substance abuse are just strong. That would be definitely the challenge in the Hmong community. For example, there's no word for the mental health at all. We have even in the medical field, we do have different type of name for different illness in mental health. But we all in the Hmong would just say, "Can you asha?" It's just in general, in very general, or Mahlu would be very general about mental health. That's all. But there's no specific illness like that, and so that's why it's a challenging as an interpreter too. It's very hard to really get the right definition, the right word coming out to the client. Here too, because of that challenge of the lack of the medical terminology in the Hmong language. Now, the second thing is that the referral of to substance abuse treatment by a trust person could increase the likelihood that the Hmong person will seek treatment. And trusted person meaning that it's a clan leaders or family representative and so forth. The next thing is that Hmong community organization would be in other places that could be used to to encourage clients to come to your facility, to your treatment, and so forth. So Hmong community organization exists in different towns, different cities throughout the state too, and they provide services to help resettle the Hmong refugees or provide other services and that would be a good places that you might use to encourage your clients to seek help to come to your treatment facilities.
A couple of things to keep in mind as you're working with Hmong clients. Certainly there are no magic answers that we have to provide here. Hmong clients are individuals, as all clients are, and so there are always going to be those individual differences. But here are some things that you might find helpful. When you're talking to a Hmong client, it's going to probably be more effective to talk about signs and symptoms than to talk about a diagnosis. So for instance, asking someone, are they depressed or are they anxious? That might be a difficult thing for them to respond to. As Long has said, a lot of these things don't even have a word really in the Hmong language to describe them. So it's going to be more helpful to ask people things like, are you worried all the time? Is it hard to relax? Saying you seem sad rather than saying you seem depressed. So focus on the signs and symptoms rather than on a diagnosis. Carefully explain and consider modifying the ways in which you provide treatment, because most of the methods that we use are very much rooted in Western medicine. So as an example, Hmong clients may not understand what talk therapy is supposed to accomplish. So it's important to explain to someone the rationale behind it. I remember having a conversation with a Hmong man who was receiving treatment with a therapist, and he said, I didn't understand why I got asked the same questions session after session after session. And the therapist was trying to determine if there had been change or movement in certain things in this person's life. They just didn't get that. And often the questions will seem intrusive because they are not things that you would normally ask. So it's important to explain to Hmong clients why they're being asked certain questions, why you feel it's important to have certain kinds of information. Another example of this would be if someone is using some kind of treatment, whether that's Suboxone or whether that would be some kind of mental health drug, that people may feel like once I'm feeling better, I can stop taking this drug, and may not understand that there's a need to continue taking the drug over a period of time in order to continue feeling better, and it might be a long-term kind of situation. They may think I'm cured, so I can stop. One of the things that I know we've experienced at the Hmong American Friendship Association is that we have over the years provided support groups for people who are experiencing, for instance, domestic violence or perhaps sexual assault. And we found that the traditional method of doing a support group where people sit around in a circle and share deep, intimate details about their lives is not a method that works particularly well in the Hmong community. And that we've been much more successful when we started adding some traditional activities and providing a group that is involved in gardening, which is traditionally something many Hmong people do, right? Or sewing, traditional sewing, whether that's story cloths or other kinds of sewing. That this was then something where people could participate in this activity and a facilitator could begin to introduce questions using that activity as kind of a springboard or a way of building off that. We've also had a very successful art therapy group and have been able to use art therapy, but the traditional concept of a support group doesn't work so well, does it, Lon?
That's exactly right.
Another thing that would be a way of perhaps modifying the way that you do treatment is recognizing that in the Hmong community, typically everybody gathers when there's a major decision to be made about someone's health. And so although I know family therapy is common for a lot of people, usually that family therapy is restricted to the close-in intimate family, whereas in the Hmong community, it might be helpful to invite a broader group of people to participate in that. I remember talking with a therapist who had told her Hmong client that it would be fine if he wanted to include in family therapy, you know, a larger group of relatives and clan members. And he was so surprised and pleased that that option was even available. I mean, obviously he had to give his permission to do that because of patient confidentiality, but in fact, he was really open and was very pleased that that kind of involvement by his extended family could be a part of his treatment process. So it's important to think about how can we maybe modify or change things a little bit.
Sure. And I think I'd like to add a little bit to that. In hospital, or mainly in hospital, when there's something serious, the Hmong family or the patient, the partners, the husband or the wife tend to call on pretty much a whole community to come over and then help make decisions and things like that. So to professional, to practitioners out there, be ready that things like that can happen. The patient, the family itself could allow things like that to help the big gathering like that, to help the family to move on to get treatments and so forth.
And then to be supportive of that treatment, it adds to the support that individual is receiving.
Yes.
Another thing to keep in mind, and this is one I had to learn the hard way, is don't assume that yes means yes. I remember early on in working with the Hmong American Friendship Association, going to a meeting with your director, and there were a number of Hmong people there. And we were pitching an idea about something that we were trying to get people's participation and support for. And there was lots of smiling and there was lots of head nodding. And I walked out of that meeting and I said, oh, that was great. We really, everybody really seems to be on board with that. And the director of the agency just looked at me and shook his head and he said, oh no, they have no intention of participating in this.
Again, that show respect.
Right. That's showing respect. It's seen as impolite, I understand, to say no, and that, a yes and a smile and a nod may simply mean I understand what you're saying to me. It doesn't mean I agree with what you're saying or I'm going to go along with what you're saying. So I had to kind of learn that the hard way and recognize that as well. And then finally, be open to integrating some traditional healing practices into Western medicine. And Lang's going to talk a little bit about how you might be able to do that.
Talking about the integrating the healing practices between Western medicine and shamanism here is that think about the shaman as in the same way that you might be thinking about the spiritual leaders, like priests, pastors, rabbis, imams. In a hospital setting, a shaman can be akin to a chaplain and so forth. So most shamans are open to Western medicines as a complement to what they are doing. Ceremonies performed by shaman can provide psychological support to a client and their family.
So have you seen that? Don Long? I know you do some work as a medical interpreter. Have you seen shaman coming into medical situations?
The shaman practice itself, I have not seen that performed in any hospital setting. But my dad, what we call is kagong. It's something that the Hmong do believe that. Even he is not a shaman, but his word through a chanting will help heal things to a patient. So my dad did go to a hospital to do that at St. Luke Hospital, for example. He did go there, but not a shaman that I have seen, because the performance of a shaman, it's a different type of shaman that will be challenging to perform in a hospital setting.
Okay. One of the things that I think providers can also do is to really leverage the strength of this very strong family clan system to benefit patients. So we've already talked about including them in, you know, family meetings or family therapy. There's also some research that suggests that it can be an effective strategy to have kind of a family clan contract. You know, we sometimes will hear about therapist patient contracts, but a therapist clan contract can also be helpful. So the research study that's cited here on the right-hand side of the screen is one that you can actually Google, and you can find the study online. But some of the key findings from this study were, first of all, they were looking at opium-dependent Hmong refugees. And as we said, some refugees came to the US already dependent on opium. So they were in a methadone maintenance program. They were looking for positive response to treatment, which they measured by people staying away from opium use and also having an improvement in their employment status, in their relationships with families, and their psychiatric status. And what they found was that when there was this kind of contract, so the patient would agree that there could be ongoing contact and communication between their family or their clan members and the therapist. And so it found that there was a significant role in improving outcomes for these Hmong patients when there was that two-way communication that was going on between the family and the clan and the therapist, so that they were very much in the loop in terms of what was happening with that particular patient and how they could best support that patient. There was another study that was done in 2012 that found when comparing Hmong and non-Hmong patients who were in a methadone maintenance program, the Hmong patients tended to stabilize with a lower dose of methadone. They didn't need as much of the drug to stabilize their situations, and they tended to have better treatment retention. And some of this, it seems, is connected to this therapist clan relationship. Does that fit with kind of your understanding of
as
the
an
community?
interpreter, my experience would be it's correct that, you know, that a lot of other family members or other clan members are coming into support, and that I do agree that that would tend, you know, with experience like that would be tend to help the patient to recover, or to could be that to support the fact that client can, the patient like that did use less dose to be effective already too. So because of the support, the social support, psychological support on top of the medication.
We are going to take some questions now from all of you, because we have gotten some questions that have come in. But before we do that, there's just two more things that I want to mention. One is that we are, the Hmong American Friendship Association is currently doing a project in which we are researching and trying to collect information on mental health and on substance use in the Hmong community. Our goal is to have 1,000 Hmong adults in Wisconsin respond to this survey. So it's a pretty ambitious goal. We'll see if we can get there. But I think, this hopefully will provide some data. As we mentioned earlier, it's very hard to get data that's specific to the Hmong community. So this is a great opportunity for us. And we want all of you to know that we, have your contact information now, so we will be able to get some of those results out to you and share with you some of that information over the coming months. We just started the survey. We just launched that. The other thing I wanted you to be aware of is that the same grant that helped to fund our being here today includes another year in which we will be working on putting together a protocol of what is the best way to work with Hmong clients. And we will be looking for some substance abuse professionals in particular to assist us in that process, to provide us with some information and some feedback. So without making a specific commitment at this time, if any of you are interested and would want to hear more about that, if you could put your contact information into the platform in the chat, or include it on your evaluation form when you return that to us, so that we'll have that information so that we can follow up with you. But let's take a look, Lung, at some of the questions that we've had. This one came in a while ago, so I think we may have answered it to some degree, but maybe you want to add on to it. How do the continuing animist beliefs and use of shamanism in healing work in tandem with or perhaps present barriers for Hmong folks in also accessing Western behavioral health or addiction supports? So how do those traditional beliefs both maybe interfere, and how can we?
I think those who still continue to carry on the traditional belief, they would consider that it will complement the Western treatment, Western medical treatment process, because the practice through shamanism here is just to support the number one is the psychological support, give psychological support, emotional support, and yet also again back to the 12 soul. So the shaman, they do believe that once the shaman perform, he or she could call back one of the lost soul, and then in turn the healing process could to speed up from there, things like that. So definitely there is some challenge in the practice because of the way how it is performed, but I would still believe that it will continue to be maintained to the bare minimum, I guess, the bare minimum to make sure that the tradition does continue, but and be a part of the healing process to the future too.
And Lung, are you aware of any places in Wisconsin that at this point are doing a good job of integrating Hmong culture in general into their treatment practices? I know I've spoken with some individual therapists, for instance, who work with Hmong clients and have been trying to learn more about Hmong culture so that they could do this. But are you aware of any place in particular where that's being done successfully?
No, I don't, because I don't see any practice being done at the hospital setting, things like that. But I do notice that medical practitioners out there are more open to take a community community input into the treatment here. So I do notice that, and I do appreciate that will definitely help their clients.
And I think that's part of the reason that we're doing a presentation like this, is to educate more people so that they can see some of the possibilities for incorporating some of these traditional practices.
Yes.
Somebody asked, how do people get opium in the United States? And my understanding is that it continues to be smuggled in. But the other thing, of course, is that there are many opioid drugs that act in a similar way to opium. And so within the Hmong community as well, we know that there are people who are using opioid substances that might be even legal prescription drugs, but being used in an illegal way. Is there anything else you'd want to add about that, Lung? Are you aware?
No, I don't, because I don't know a way to get it myself. So I don't know. I don't know anybody who's trying to get it, but I know that for sure out there's people who are trying to, because there are people who are already addicted. And they're trying to get it, so they do whatever it takes to get it too, through any other way.
And of course, some people end up on drugs like heroin, which is another, form of another opioid type of substance. And we know that sometimes people who start out on prescription drugs actually end up on things like heroin because it's cheaper and might be easier to get on the street. Someone asked about, what does someone on opium look like? And of course, there are a variety of signs and symptoms when people are on opium. Often that they may have that euphoria initially. After a while, like with any addiction, people start to need the drug just to function. They don't even reach the level of euphoria, but just to get by day to day. And if they don't have it, then you may see the the sweating and that deep craving of the drug. Anything else you'd want to?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. So somebody asked about the needs of the first or second generation Hmong people and how young adults are doing in the Hmong culture. One of the things I mentioned earlier is that even trauma can carry itself over from generation to generation, and we know more and more about that now. So that people who many of the young people today were actually born in the U.S., right? So they didn't directly experience fleeing Laos and having to cross the Mekong River. But how do you think the past continues to impact the younger generations of Hmong individuals?
Yeah, I think the Hmong, it's a very strong in oral tradition, and the elders or the grandpa, grandma used to just tell story to the younger generations what happened, and also there are a lot of Hmong video out there, and that the younger generation can see that as well, and to see what had happened before throughout history. And a lot of young Hmong are start to be more interested in what had happened in their past, their parents or grandparents' past, and so forth. So, and now there are, like for example, the UW of Milwaukee. They do have a history department that Dr. Xia Wang is Jianzhu Yi Wang. She's the head of the history department there, and a lot of Hmong, a lot of other non-Hmong are taking history. And at the Hmong American Friendship Association, I do have classes that are coming to visit us over there. And I did go over the big story cloth that we have, all of that. So that helps to the younger generation to see, to understand more about the history and what this could mean to their future too. So I do see that.
I think one of the roles that I've seen the mutual assistance agencies fill is that providing some of that history to people, because younger Hmong people may experience some of the negative Asian stereotypes, and we've certainly, unfortunately, seen more of that in the last couple of years. And so they need that other side as well, to have that pride in their culture and in their traditions. And yet, traditionally, a lot of Hmong families don't talk a lot about that past. So having that history available, I know we're going to be doing a project at the Hmong American Friendship Association to teach some of that history to Hmong youth, and then have them interview their elders who can still share some of those stories about life in Laos and fleeing to Thailand. So I think that's going to be a powerful means of strengthening, Hmong youth to really understand what a courageous and resilient history they come from.
Last year, there was one young boy. It's a non-Hmong. It's a white mom, and then with a young 7-year-old boy coming from Minneapolis to Milwaukee, and then by searching that, they would like to know more about the Hmong. And the mom and the little boy stopped by a Hmong American Friendship to see all the Hmong museum. And I had a chance to talk to both of them and talk about about the history of the Hmong, all of that. So I'm so thrilled about having that experience to talk to a young boy who is interested in knowing more about the history too.
Here's an interesting question that we got. What are your suggestions to help Hmong individuals that are incarcerated and in a treatment program? I have found that the men I have worked with have experienced that their families have exiled them due to their disrespect to their clan, and this leaves an individual without support. The struggles then become how to reintegrate Hmong when they are or feel isolated. So one thing I would just say, based on the project we've been working on, is that one piece of this project has been to educate clan leaders. And we have produced a video, and that's been, I know Long's been involved in getting that out to the community and having discussions to try to help clan leaders understand more about addiction and what that can lead to, and how difficult it is to stop using substances without support and treatment, that it isn't just a matter of willpower, so that hopefully some of that shame that people experience would be lessened. But what would you add to that, Lung? I can understand that would be very difficult for people who come out of, it's difficult enough for anyone coming out of incarceration to feel supported. But for people to feel like their family or their clan has turned their back on them because they're ashamed of them, that's obviously going to make their re-entry into the community even harder.
Yeah. It's true. It's no matter what, it's going to be a challenge for the individual who is out of incarcerations, or for professionals out there, treatment professionals out there, to really try hard to help their clients. But then let me add to this that, we do have, again, the 18 Clan Council, or the Hmong clan leaders for each clan, and community-based organizations such as ours. So to the professionals out there, make sure that you leverage that, you use the resources such as this to help your clients, to make referral to the clan leaders, or get to the organization like this, so that whatever we can make other referrals to help you too. And we also, at the community-based organization, we are certainly concerned that, what would be the best way to really help our community members to be, as they are out of incarceration, and they want to be the contributive citizens again. So we certainly like to find ways, and we certainly like to work together to make sure that they are back into the community, good citizens, and be productive citizens in the community again. So definitely we want to work together on that.
So Long, would people be able to reach out to you for some of those resources, even if they're not in Milwaukee? Maybe you could refer them to other places around the state, depending on where the individual lives.
Yes,
Okay.
we do have, resources available, referral resources available. So just feel free to give us a call.
Yeah, or reach out through email, because I know our email addresses are in the chat. So either way. This is a question, Long, that I think I know you've done some work in this area, so I think you might be able to field this one. It says, I manage the children's programs at Milwaukee County, serving kids with delays and disabilities. I know the focus of this session is specific to AODA, but I'm wondering if there are some recommendations that could be generalized to discussions with parents about their kids' disability. Also, are there other suggestions of how the county can best serve children, youth, and families with disabilities while honoring the Hmong culture? I remember when the Hmong American Friendship Association first began to kind of do some outreach in this disability area, there was discussion about the fact that sometimes there is, again, shame connected with disability and not wanting to acknowledge that a child has a disability. So can you talk a little bit about that, and how we can serve Hmong kids who have disabilities?
Yes, again, going back to my interpretation experience of working in hospital, in schools, all of that too, with running into parents with children with disability, all of that. I still I think that using it's hard to really admit it, definitely. And the thing is that the parents don't know how to help, so they really rely on professionals out there, with experience in dealing with disability. So even though they don't know what to do, that the parents don't know what to do, but that yet they run into the challenge of really accepting that there's disability. But other than that, I think we certainly like to have the parents, like to have professionals to reach out to us too, again, reach out to us, and then we can, many times will be due to the language barrier too. That's it. So then when we clarify that and we explain that that's, it does exist, even if it's not noticeable, it does exist, that disability does exist. So then by doing that, the parents tend to understand more about the effect that that disability would cause later if they don't get help. So then the parents tend to be more open from there on. So make sure that the language barrier is one of the things that could be overcome first.
Okay. And you're in Milwaukee, this is obviously someone who's from Milwaukee, so the Hmong American Friendship Association would be a great place to start. But there are mutual assistance agencies around the state. Lon could also connect you with one of those. We mentioned some of them earlier and where some of them are, but there are mutual assistance associations in virtually every community, I think, in Wisconsin that has a significant Hmong population. So we could get you connected with somebody.
Yes.
And this is a great follow-up question. It says, will family help guide us to the clan leaders? So if we're dealing with a patient and we think it might be helpful to get the clan involved, how do we do that? Will the family help us do that? Or, how do we make that connection?
You professional, they could ask the family, the person, could be the patient, or your client, him or herself, that who should we contact as for your clan leader? That could be done that way too. Or let's say if in a hospital setting where the patient can hardly speak, and then maybe the spouse could help make that connection too to the professionals, or just ask the patient that who should we contact, and that could be accomplished that way as well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think that answers the questions that we had here. And again, you have our contact information if there's something else that you still would like to talk to us about. I do want to just again remind you that you will receive a copy of the slides and also an evaluation form. Oh, we have one more question? Okay. Oh. I'll finish up this and then we can take that question. I would just ask that you please return that evaluation to us. That's really important for us to get feedback about what's helpful, what's not helpful for you. And we also want to be accountable to our funders. So we want to be sure to do that. I think we have maybe one more question we're just waiting on, and then we will try to deal with that and wrap things up. One thing I just wanted to ask you about when you're talking about clan leaders, I've also heard that there are sub-clan leaders. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, actually, let's say there's, for example, in each, throughout the whole United States, we have 18 clan council that represent all Hmong in the United States. But then in each state, we do have a sub-clan, 18 clan council that represent the state itself. Okay. And then from each state, in each town, there's 18 clan council leader or within each town also. Okay. So we disperse information down from the very top to the bottom that way as well. So for example, if let's say Xiong, my last name, that's a clan. And so if you ask me who is your clan leader in Milwaukee, I can I can tell you that. Or how about the strong clan leader in Wisconsin? So we do have that. Or
Okay.
the strong clan leader in the U.S. We do have that also. So that's why it's called maybe the sub clan leader would be like that. Or just like an organization, we do have the clan leaders and then somebody
So
to help. And
the patient would know which clan leader they wanted to have included.
yes,
If-
they can.
okay.
If you ask who could we who could we go to, who could we call as your clan leader, usually that individual would be able to tell you or otherwise get information for you to call.
Okay. So here's another, this is a great question. How can we support among individuals who are part of the LGBTQ plus community who have substance abuse issues? Because again, there's, we have shame potentially going on a couple different levels here with that community. So how can we best support them?
That is still a challenge to the Hmong community too, definitely. I would suggest again that, like, for example, the Hmong American Friendship Association, we are a nonprofit organization, so we do tend to support LGBTQ community in the organization too. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. That's
Okay.
all.
So reaching out to the mutual assistance
Yeah.
associations again would be a good idea. Somebody wants to know, can people separate or distance from their clan?
Possible if some people decide to, I don't want, there's no, nobody can force you to stay, nobody can, but most people so far would be, once you are strong, you will stay strong. Or you're a yang, you will stay a yang for the lifetime. But to really change from a strong to a yang for the men, on the men's side, usually that does not happen. Even though tend to stay away from the clan leader, that's it's their own choice. Not to get connected, that's their own choice. But then to change the last name, no. So unless the lady get married and then carry the husband's or the man's last name, that's all.
Okay. So if people choose for whatever reason to distance themselves from the clan, what's kind of the downside of that?
That's personal choice,
Okay.
because they may find that it's more beneficial to them to stay away, and then or to stay connected. That's their choice. But there's no that's personal choice. There's no downfall
Okay.
at all.
And is there a list somewhere of all the clan leaders in Wisconsin?
Yes, at the organization we do have that.
Okay. Okay. So again, it would be through the mutual assistance
Yes.
organizations.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that wraps up our questions. And
So at this point,
final
I'd
words?
just like to thank everyone to join us to this, virtual presentation. We're trying our best to share our views and also to answer any question, the comment that you may have. So again, thank you so much for that. And so at this point, this will conclude our presentation.